Hello, everyone, and welcome to January's edition of for the National Weather Association. My name is Tim Bryce. I'm a forecaster with the National Weather Service, and I am joined on the video call today with Ms. Becca Mosier. She is up at the Arctic Test Bed in Alaska Region Headquarters. How are you doing, Ms. Becca?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I imagine, well, what's the temperature up there in good old Alaska these days?
Right now, it's actually pretty warm. It's in the upper 20s, low 30s, a little bit of rain out there, freezing rain, so that kind of stinks. But it's a lot colder in the lower 48 right now.
I was going to say, is it, the 20s and 30s, are those your highs or your lows?
Those are the highs, which is pretty warm for this time of year. So.
Yeah. Well, it's not many times that I can say El Paso was maybe a little colder than where you were, because we had a high yesterday of 37 degrees. But I know for a lot of people, they laugh at that, because a lot of places, my daughter spent a couple weeks up in Dickinson, North Dakota, where, I don't think she got above zero several days in a row. But we all know it is the middle of winter, but we're going to talk hurricanes. We had a long drought of, I guess, not landfalling major hurricanes. We hadn't seen a major landfalling hurricanes for quite a while. And just like the rainfall droughts many times end in a flood or a deluge, we ended up in a, so to speak, flood of major hurricanes. We had 3 landfalling major hurricanes this year. And meteorologists were on the front lines of all of those systems, and we're going to talk with several. We have a great panel of people here today, and we're going to talk with several of them, how they supported the hurricanes, whether they supported them from a distance, up close, or on the grounds as the hurricanes came ashore. So basically, we're just, Becca and I tried to come up with a title for today's presentation, and but last night it came to me, something like Tales from the Hurricane, I think would have been a great title. But we stuck with Life of a Meteorologist during a major hurricane. I know a lot of us played armchair quarterback as we watched these hurricanes come ashore, but several of our guest panelists will either were directly impacted by the hurricanes, or were deployed to locations near or where the hurricanes came ashore. So we are looking forward to having a great conversation today. I did want to point out, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, and we'll meet them all here real quick, you can tweet at us. Give us a post or tweet at, and it's hashtag NWA WebWed.
I know,
so
it's so webinar
Wednesday. I know it's hard to say, and I always get my B's and my D's mixed up. So, so remember, if you want to ask a question of any of our panelists, NWA WebWed on Twitter, and Becca and I have our tweet decks up and going, and we're keeping an eye on them. But real quickly. Run down the line here, and I'm going to quickly introduce each of our panelists, and then we'll get to the conversation. So first up is Mr. Aaron Treadway. He's forecaster at the NWS office there in San Antonio. How are you doing today, Aaron?
I'm doing pretty good from Central Texas, where it's actually cooler than Alaska. Our highs yesterday didn't get out of the 20s. So,
yeah. I'm going to hear that all day long, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. I started the theme there. All right. Moving down the line here is Mr. Alan Holt, and he's at I keep wanting to say but it's KIII TV, and you're there in
That's
Corpus
the easy
Christi,
way to
right?
say it. Yeah, that's the easy way to say it. But KIII, yep, Corpus Christi, Texas, down here with Greg.
Very good, very good. And then coming on down my list here is Mr. Jason Plowman. He is the, let me see if I can say this all right, manager of Met Meteorologist and manager of business. There, yeah. Okay, go ahead and say your title so I don't mess it up.
Yeah, manager of meteorology and manager of business continuity for Universal Weather and Aviation here in Houston, Texas. And again, we're good. 21 degrees right now. So.
Woohoo! I was going to say Universal Aviation and Weather, so I'm glad I had you say that, because I had it all backwards. So very good. Let's see, coming on down the line, we got Gordon Strasburg, and Gordon is the female liaison for the National Weather Service, and you're over there near DC, right, Gordon?
Yep, that's correct, Tim. I work with one of FEMA's 3 national incident management assistance teams.
Very good. Sliding on down the line, we got Matt Moreland here. He's currently the MIC in the beautiful office in San Diego. What's your temperature there in San Diego right now?
It was in the 50s this morning, so I am not complaining.
Not too bad. But for those of you that don't, for those of you who don't know it, Matt was the former MIC at Key West and was there when Irma came ashore. So we're looking forward to hearing your stories. Sliding on down the line here, we got John Kurtzman, who is forecaster at the NWS office there in beautiful Norman, Oklahoma.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Sam. It's 17 degrees if we're going to keep up this temperature. It feels like 9 degrees outside. I got this whole mesonet at my disposal, so
it is. We are a bunch of meteorologists, so I did want to make sure that we talk at least a little meteorology. Coming up is Greg. Is it Hevener? Did I say that right?
Hevener, yes, Hevener.
Hevener. So, and you're a forecaster there in beautiful NWS Corpus Christi, correct?
Correct. And I moved down here a couple of years ago. I was told, "Oh, it never freezes in Corpus. You don't need a winter jacket." Yeah, come on, 2 years now. It's freezing.
Did you guys get any snow there?
We did. So back in early December, we got to about 5 inches down here on the south side where I live. So meso banding really worked.
Very good. Very good. So I want to make sure, because I was jumping around, I got everybody on the panel, right? I didn't miss anybody? Good. Well, I want to hop right in. And Becca, I think it's great that we have a mix. We have government meteorologists. We have broadcast meteorologists. We have private meteorologists. And I think that just goes to striking the point that it's a team effort in the meteorological community to kind of support a major landfalling hurricanes. It's just not the National Weather Service meteorologist issuing the forecast. It's just not the broadcast meteorologist trying to get the messages out. It's just not the private meteorologist supporting the businesses and the people that they support. It's a team effort, and one of the challenges that I'm sure we could talk about is kind of that unified messaging, making sure we're all kind of talking the same thing, but we all kind of fit into different niches and reach people and places different ways. And it's just kind of impressive the way it takes a team effort to get that message out. So let's get things started here. We're going to start with Mr. Aaron Treadway over there in beautiful San Antonio. Aaron, you had a kind of a unique technological challenge. You didn't actually have to go to Houston or Key West or Puerto Rico, but you were still provided a key support during the landfall of Irma. Is that not correct, sir?
Yeah, that's right, Tim. So the Weather Service as a whole has a backup program where when big events like Katrina or these hurricanes this summer or tornadoes happen, other offices, if one goes down, can back them up. And typically here in Southern Region, we actually have 3 backup offices. For ours, we back up Corpus and Greg. We do Brownsville, and we actually do Norman, where John is. But for Irma, for the first time, Region added a 4th order backup, and we were chosen to be Key West to help out Matt and John and Greg down there. So it really was a big thing when, I walked in the office 4 days before the hurricane made landfall, and management was like, hey, you're going to have to set up backup for Key West. And as the backup focal point, that was a lot for me to do. And it really became a team effort of our ITO, our various focal points of getting the forecast ready, our warnings ready, and everything to just be prepared to even do the backup. And it was a really big thing because, watching where Irma was going, where the models were steering, Key West was probably the office that was going to go down. So it wasn't like, oh, we're going to prepare and not much is going to happen. We knew that there was a good chance. And so it added a little bit of the weight to it, but it was also kind of a big honor for our office as a whole to be able to be chosen by Region to do this. And it really comes down to all being about the Weather Service mission of protecting lives and property. It's, if Key West went down, if that happened, we would be right there to pick up the slack. And also it freed up Key West to do a lot of the DSS. So after the event, we stayed up for a week, and it let Matt and the crew down there do the local DSS and provide support for the recovery effort. So it took 4 days of preparation, not a lot of overtime or anything ahead of the event. But if I can share my screen here.
Yeah. Hey,
yeah,
Aaron, go ahead. As you're talking, I got a quick question for you. I'm going to show everyone your screen. But that's not standard. What you did was not standard for the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service has primary, secondary, tertiary backups for all of their office, which is kind of impressive enough. But you were, I can't even pronounce it. What was it for you for Key West?
I believe it's the quaternary backup. It's the first time there's ever been a fourth backup office. So yeah, it was a first, not just for us, but for the Weather Service. And so it was a lot to kind of take on. This is our operations on Sunday. So this is landfall day for the hurricane. And this is the afternoon period. So on the right there, you can see kind of the timeline of when Key West issued their extreme wind warnings, some of the measurements there. And then as they started to go down, we first took over their social media, which I'll talk about in just a second, and then eventually their warnings and then their full forecast package. So it started with a little bit of overtime, a couple of extra forecasters, and then we brought in our full evening shift early to be able to back them up. And through the week, we ended up backing them up for 5 days. And thankfully, the weather here was quiet in Central Texas, so we were able to handle that almost entirely with our normal staffing, a little bit of overtime here and there. But pretty much because of quiet weather here, we were able to forecast for an office 1,000 miles away, which is really a big testament not just to the technology that we set up in those 4 days to prepare our forecast systems, but the radars and the satellites and everything, and the models that allow us to do that. And really quickly, I'll wrap up and say pretty much for us, one of the big impactful things for me and for a lot of us at the office was getting to do the social media for Key West. They had done a great job, and I'm sure Matt and the guys will talk about it, of preparing the community through some really big tweets by some of their forecasters and stuff. But as the storm was going on, we continued to tweet as NWS Key West from Central Texas. And so it gave the appearance that the office was up and everything was fine and everything. And it gave a lot of people actually hope. We got a lot of tweets saying, hey, I'm glad there's still information going. It gives us hope that things aren't, as bad. And we started to get a lot of, hey, what's the conditions on Cujo Key or there in Key West? And it became a difficult thing to do because we didn't really know what was going on. By that point, we had lost, I've been Google chatting Greg up until we lost comms with Corpus. We had a phone line for a while. We lost all that. So we really didn't know. So it was really hard to be like, well, we don't know what's going on outside because we're 1,000 miles away. And we eventually, after the event, we're like, hey, we're taking over. We thought that, in the middle of the event was not the time to be like, hey, we're in NWS San Antonio. We did that shortly after the hurricane. But we were able to kind of turn that struggle around and really start pushing a lot of the recovery information. Once the Monroe County was back up and running, they started a website and a Facebook page and a new Twitter account. And so we then turned that around to become that one-stop shop of not just weather for the recovery, but all the info too. So it was a really fun adventure, and it really was just all about being that team player in the Weather Service and continuing our support.
Yeah, very, very impressive. I got one question for you there.
Yep.
So for those of you that don't know, San Antonio is basically landlocked, and they're doing forecasts for a very kind of watery sort of WFO. What are the challenges for you as a forecaster in trying to forecast for a place? Because, again, your backups are, you could run them by me real quick, but it's certainly, do you back up like Corpus?
Yeah, so we back up Corpus and Brownsville. So our two primary offices that we get a lot of practice with are actually coastal offices. Another kind of unique thing about our office is we're the only landlocked office in the Weather Service to have backup offices that are coastal offices. So it does present a unique challenge. We have several forecasters with coastal experience here in the office, but also we do a lot of backups with Corpus and Brownsville. So that's where we get a lot of that experience for the coastal stuff. We were able to know what all those products were because we practiced with them a significant amount. And so to walk into Key West, yes, it was a total geographic area we didn't know, but we knew generally well what happens in the summertime when there's not a big, massive major hurricane bearing down. So that was good. And then we were familiar with the NWS products through the practice of our other backup offices, which gave us some good experience there.
Yeah, so it wasn't a complete switcheroo for you guys. Well, that's great. And of course, it goes to the fact of backing up. Hey, Becca, do you have any questions for
I don't have a question, but I was going to make a comment about the fact that you guys gave the public hope, that that's not something we as meteorologists sort of think about in our jobs all the time, is that we actually do provide hope to the public that, everything actually may be okay. And so that was sort of something that really stuck out to me about what we do as meteorologists. Sort of the side job there.
Well, one of the I remember, I can't remember his name, but he's a fire chief over in Virginia, and he says the meteorologists are now they essentially could be digital first responders, and when it comes to the hurricanes, we're the flow of information. We're the ones providing a lot of information, kind of a information conduit that flows through us. And I can only imagine, Aaron, like you were saying, that once you're able to get information and get that out to the people through social media, that was providing just a tremendous, because that, in a vacuum without any information, that is just very frustrating for people. So it was great that you were able to do that.
Yeah, thanks.
So we're going to move kind of north of you to Mr. John Kurtzman there in the Norman office. And John actually got to do double duty because he was actually deployed to Key West, but before that, he was actually deployed up to or down to Southern Region headquarters there in Fort Worth. I'm going to have him talk on his experience there, because you were both at Southern Region headquarters supporting Harvey, and then you jumped over to FEMA and did some support there. Is that not right, John?
Yeah, that's correct. So at first I was, I don't remember how the phone call happened. I don't remember how the whole 2-week period or 3-week period of the hurricanes kind of blend together now. But yeah, so we got a call to go down to the Southern Region Regional Operations Center in Fort Worth, Texas. If you're not familiar with the Weather Service, for those, every weather service is split up into regions, and there's 4 regions that cover the CONUS. Southern Region headquarters is in Fort Worth, Texas. But there's a regional operations center in each region, and part of their job is to basically take in what the forecast offices, the weather forecast offices, put out, the products and everything, and then consolidate that down and basically simplify the message for our large-scale partners. So a big partner of the Regional Operations Center in Southern Region is the Texas State Operations Center, which is in Austin. So if you can imagine, there's actually 13 forecast offices that cover the entire state of Texas. So you've got 13 individual forecast offices that are forecasting for this very large state, and it can get really complicated. We do a really good job of coordinating with each other. And even my office here in Norman, we're considered an honorary Texas office because we have responsibility in Texas. So we're part of that 13. And so basically the job of the ROC is, one of the jobs is to basically brief FEMA Region 6 and FEMA Region 4. And FEMA Region 4 covers the eastern part, southeast part of the United States. And I'm sure Matt will talk, can hint on that. Like Florida's part of FEMA Region 4. So it's also part of Southern Region of the Weather Service. But FEMA Region 6 covers New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. So they have those responsibilities there as well. And FEMA Region 6 headquarters is in Denton, Texas, which is just up the road from Fort Worth, not too far away. So my original deployment was just to go down to the Southern Region Operations Center and basically be a on-duty meteorologist in what we call it the ROC, the Regional Operations Center. And actually, Tim, I was partnered up with Marissa, who used to work in your office now at Lubbock. So Marissa and I worked all weekend together, and Marissa and I go back from training class a while back too. So it was fun to work with somebody that I knew. So that was always good. So I'm going to try to share my screen here so you guys can see what the ROC actually looks like. Let's see. And so this is kind of a shot of what the Regional Operations Center looks like at Southern Region headquarters. So it's myself and Marissa, and then Jen McNatt, who's actually the meteorologist in charge of the Regional Operations Center at Southern Region. So a lot of the things we were doing, we kind of call it, I kind of look at it as we're trying to protect the forecast offices that are being impacted by Harvey during this event. So, and what I mean by protect is there's a lot of requests that come down from the Weather Service headquarters in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of people a lot of national media that want interviews and want to know what's going on. And the forecast offices are extremely busy. I mean, you have the Houston office that was basically getting surrounded by water. The people were having to shelter in the office. They were having to answer all these requests from the Houston OEM or Houston EM, Galveston Emergency Management, all of those people are hitting them with their own local requests. And so we're trying to handle all the national requests and try to alleviate some of the pressure from the forecast offices that are actually under the gun of these events. So that's part of one of our biggest jobs. And I know Marissa and I talked a lot about, our job was to make it as take an already really stressful situation for the forecast offices and try to alleviate some of that stress. And it's amazing the little things that can happen, either politically or even just things that need to be taken care of that the regions can take care of. And so a lot of our stuff seems to be, we kind of just call it catching the crap, if you will, and trying to kind of alleviate the pressure off the forecast offices. And so we kind of made it our duty to help out our colleagues in the field as best we could. So even though we weren't even under the gun of the hurricane, we felt that stress, and we've got friends that work in the Corpus office and the Houston office and Lake Charles, and we were worried about them. It was always great to hear from them when we knew they were okay. And so that's kind of what our job was, just basically a consolidator of information and then sending it back out and getting it to the deployed METs that are at the State Operations Center and at FEMA Region 6. So I was only supposed to be there for the weekend through landfall. And then, of course, my deployment got pushed even farther. So basically, let me unshare my screen here. So my deployment got pushed even farther. Luckily, I packed extra clothes, and this is something I thought I was like, I might get stuck there longer than 2 days, and I actually ended up being down there for a week. And part of it was I worked a couple more days in the Rock to help out post-landfall, and then they needed to alleviate my friend Chris McKinney from Southern Region, or Chris and both Kurt from FEMA Region 6 in Denton. So I was sent to Denton, Texas, kind of a baptism by fire to be the on-site meteorologist there. And I have a picture of Kurt actually briefing my first day there. This is the leadership briefing once it starts to share here.
Yep, you're good.
You're good.
This is the basically one of the conference rooms in the bunker at the Denton at FEMA Region 6. If you don't never seen FEMA Region 6, you actually there's not really a building there. It's like a shack on a hill, and then you get in an elevator and go down into like a Cold War era bunker. It's quite fascinating, really. So they work 12-hour shifts, and I put that in quotes because your shifts are really like 14 to 15 hours depending on beginning briefings and ending briefings. And so I basically took over for Kurt for 2 days as the on-site meteorologist in FEMA Region 6, and they refer to you as, hey, weather guy. We need the information, and then it's your job to collect the information. And so a lot of times it was just me collaborating with the Regional Operations Center to get information back, and with the River Forecast Centers. And really got to give a shout out to all the forecast offices who were doing these fantastic graphics. Like the West Gulf River Forecast Center was on top of everything during this event with all the rainfall and the flooding graphics. They saved my life several times with these requests I was getting from FEMA to help them. And it's amazing to see FEMA operate. There are so many moving parts, and I don't want to call it controlled chaos because it's not controlled chaos, but there's just so many moving parts that are going on that it's quite impressive, really.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
That's okay. That happens sometimes, that he'll freeze up. But if he pops back in here, we'll let him kind of finish up. I think he was getting close to the end there, but he was providing that support from afar again, which is critically important because, like he was saying, it takes that pressure off of the local offices. Now, he did later on, I don't know if he actually got back to Norman before he got deployed to Key West, but he got to go down to Key West. But as we kind of, and so as people, because I know we're jumping kind of from hurricane to hurricane, and that's something that I kind of wanted to do. I didn't want to go just to the Harvey and then Irma and then Maria. What I'm doing is I'm taking people who kind of remotely supported it, and then as we get closer, and we're going to end up with people who are actually on the ground as the hurricane came ashore. And Jonathan's back.
Yeah, sorry, good old Southern Region internet, right?
That's okay. I noticed Aaron dropped away as well.
Yeah, we both probably dropped. I was worried when I logged in. I'm like, oh, this isn't going to go well. I can already tell we're having internet problems this morning. So sorry.
So. No problem. Go ahead. It sounded like you were just kind of wrapping up.
Yeah, I don't know where I stopped at, but I was just saying, like, I was here for 4 more days, and they flew me down to Key West. And it was a wonderful experience there. I mean, given the circumstances, I mean, I wish it wouldn't have happened given the destruction, but, it was Matt, great MIC, and the staff at Key West is just tops. And Greg and Matt will talk more about it. But I was just happy that I could help wherever I could during these events, and it was a heck of an experience. We'll put it that way. So that's really all I have.
Okay,
thanks,
great.
John. That was great.
Yeah, I feel that you can probably jump in there when we're talking to Greg and Matt here. But we're going to jump over now to Alan over at the KIII there in Corpus. And he's the broadcast, one of the broadcast Mets over there. And he's going to talk about and kind of go through what it was like as it looks like something's in the Gulf. Hey, it's maybe headed our way. And then since you're right there, and it looks like this may or may not directly impact your area of responsibility, how was things working there at the TV station for you?
Okay, so this was it came off of Africa, so it was a long tracking storm, and initially it kind of fizzled out in the Caribbean. At that point, we weren't that concerned about it, but that was still over a week away from landfall. As things progressed, when it got over the Yucatan, that was on about Monday, I think, and it made landfall on Friday. But around Monday is when we started to raise the flag up and say, hey, this thing could be a problem. It's going to be something that we have to watch a little bit more closely. And leading up to the Friday landfall, one of the challenges was trying to get the public to understand that we weren't just, crying wolf here. This was going to be a system that's going to come ashore. And going into it, I know from at least our perspective, we were thinking that it was going to be more of a rain event. It obviously was in Houston, but leading up to it, the models weren't really indicating huge amounts of strengthening. And I thought that was one of the parts of the forecast that was underdone leading up to the actual event until a few days out. But fast forward to about Wednesday, Thursday, we started understanding, okay, this is going to be a stronger storm than we originally anticipated. And it was starting to become pretty obvious that it was going to impact somewhere within our viewing area, which basically extends up to about the Port Lavaca area and then down south of Baffin Bay, if anyone's familiar with that. So the day of, I had a really hard time. I worked 22 hours, I think, like 2 a.m. to midnight on Friday. And it made landfall like 8, 9, 10 o'clock. It was a really slow landfall. But the challenge I had for me personally was the message that the city of Corpus Christi was sending out. The mayor came on and said, we're going to take a hands-off approach, governmental approach. There's been a lot of politics going on. And he basically left it up to the citizens of Corpus Christi to decide whether to stay or to go. And I mean, we're at this point looking at a major hurricane moving ashore, what eventually was 30 miles north of Corpus Christi downtown as the crow flies. And we're saying, it's up to you from the city standpoint. So, 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the morning, I start seeing some models come in. They're within the forecast cone. It was the RPM, I believe, that I showed. And Corpus Christi was on the southern flank of the eye wall. And at that point, I was starting to be like, okay, well, this could be a problem if this were to happen. So I started saying things like, if it were up to me, I would be out of here. Just take the weekend. The worst case scenario, it comes into Corpus Christi. Best case scenario, it misses us and we're out of power for the weekend. But regardless, you probably still will not want to be here. Ended up the city was out of power for a while. But with that message that I was saying, I definitely caught some feedback from it, because I was basically telling people if it were me, I would get out of here. And I remember talking to Tom Johnstone, who was the meteorologist in charge here. I played golf with him all the time. And I asked him, hey, what are y'all doing with your families at the office? And he said, we're telling them to leave. And once he told me that, I didn't go on air saying that, but it was enough for me to say, okay, I mean, that's the right decision, where I'd rather leave than to be here. And then you have Rockport mayor saying things like, if you're going to stay for this thing, to write a Sharpie of your social security number so we can find you after this thing hits us. And it hit Rockport, dead on. And one of the things that was surprising to me as this was coming into land was how small the wind field was of the really damaging and powerful winds. It was maybe 25 to 30 miles outside of center, that just hurricane force winds. This is a Category 4, and the hurricane force winds only extended out maybe 25 to 30 miles into the extreme northern parts of Corpus Christi. So we really dodged a bullet here. And one of the other things I definitely want to say, because I know Greg's on here, is that I think that given the intensity of the storm and how ferocious the winds were, 130 miles per hour at least, from what I know, direct impacts on fatalities in our viewing area where this thing hit, we had less than 5. And to me, when I think of that,
impressive.
I think that speaks to the level of preparedness that the city was, not only because of KIII, but the weather service, probably the other media outlets, radio. When I heard that, it's just, I couldn't believe it. You see the destruction in Rockport and Port Aransas, both of those cities still trying to recover. Businesses are still gone. But when I saw that and I see the destruction, trailer parks everywhere, people obviously got the message. Even if it was a little bit stern coming from me, I've definitely gotten feedback that say, hey, thank you for speaking like that. You saved our lives. And I've gotten numerous messages like that.
Wow.
So I'd rather err on that side rather than to say, oh, don't worry about it. We'll let you decide, what to do going forward. So I tried to do it as politically correct as I could, and just say if it were up to me and if it was I would leave. But everybody's different. That's just what I would do as someone that's fairly knowledgeable about what's coming in.
Sure. Now, you guys you usually don't run 24 hours a day. But of course you did when the hurricane came ashore. What was your staffing like as you ramped up into the hurricane and during the hurricane landfall?
Okay, we were full on. We were overlapping the meteorologist side. We were overlapping shifts like 2 days before. So we always had somebody here. There was never not a meteorologist here, on our staff. And then the day of, we were all here. The full on Channel 3, all of our reporters, anchors, photographers, even staff that was on the sales side of the building they were staying here. We have this huge mega structure. It's really weird. We're not that big of a market. And we have this massive building right in the middle of downtown, and it's a pretty sturdy one. So all of our employees they were actually staying here for shelter. Not just the on-air people, but we were fully staffed. We all put in probably 20 to 24 hours from the meteorologists on Friday, and then we started rotating 8-hour shifts after that, as it was coming ashore. And then the rain potential started to shift up to Houston, because initially, I remember on Wednesday before, the GFS was printing 40 inches of rain in the coastal bend where we live, Corpus Christi, and I posted that to social media, and you wouldn't believe the amount of fake news comments I got from that. And it ended up being underdone, at the end of the day. So we were just fully staffed that whole weekend. I worked the whole weekend straight, slept at the station. Another thing, I don't know if I'm just going off the kind of weird tangent, but I actually went home to my apartment after midnight. We were still under tropical storm force conditions, and I went home just to check on things, and the apartment above me and below me, their windows were blown out, their curtains were flying around, and mine was just untouched. I don't know why, but I ended up sleeping there for 3 or 4 hours, and I'll never forget the sounds of, things blowing around and the siding hitting and glass breaking. It was just a weird thing. And then I went back to the studio, and there was no power, so I showered with candles on, and it was crazy. That was a crazy experience. No comment.
No. That's just, it's very impressive.
Mind-blowing.
It is. So you got a little time off, and you said you went back to your apartment and you tried to get some sleep.
Yeah.
What's going through your mind? I mean, how are you even able to sleep, I guess is the question.
I was just exhausted at that point. I mean, I had been up for probably 24 hours because I was calling my parents. I actually had a lot of friends in the Rockport area where it hit dead on. I hadn't heard from them. I had been dating at that point a girl that lived in Rockport I'd been dating her for 3 years, and we had just split up. So I knew the area so well when this thing was coming in. Like, I mean, I was able to just pinpoint exact locations. This gas station's here, this golf course is there. These probably aren't going to be the same after this. And it was just, I was just thinking about people. I didn't know if they had left or stayed. I know the mayor of Fulton, which is a little town north of Rockport. I'm friends with him. His name's Jimmy Kendrick, and he was actually out and about, like, getting video of all this stuff. And I was, man, I didn't know. So I made a bunch of calls when I woke up in the morning, and, you know, just tried to keep a level head. But yeah, wasn't that much sleep this week, that weekend.
Wow. Very impressive that, and you know, as we're getting closer in, we're talking about people who are more directly impacted by the storm, and it's hard to separate that from, you know, doing your job. You know, it's hard to be doing the job at the station, knowing what's going on with friends that I know, what's going on with my apartment, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And the outreach was crazy. I mean, just. It was nuts. I mean, there was so much feedback, and a lot of times in weather events, you know, all of us obviously know we bust forecasts sometimes. And this one I thought was a kind of a bust in terms of the rain outlook, because we didn't really get a whole lot of rain here, but the feedback from people that were affected by it I've really not heard any negativity. It's all been, you guys did a great job. Everyone was safe. We did the right thing. And that goes across the board. The weather service here, I mean, everybody just seemed like it worked the way it was supposed to be. And I think that the death toll reflects that. I mean, that's a direct reflection of everybody doing their job.
Very good. Very
Incredible
good.
story. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to switch things up. I know I had said I was going to go to Matt and then Greg, but I'm going to go to Greg first. I want to chat with Greg here real quick about, because kind of leading into that, because you are a forecaster there in Corpus, in the infinite wisdom of the Weather Service. It was right after Harvey had hit, they trucked you down to Key West, right?
Yeah. So basically, the way it worked was they put out a call. Somebody put out a call for volunteers to head down to the Florida offices to help out with Irma. And so after Harvey had hit, you know, I was directly impacted here. Actually, my new roof's getting put on this week as we speak because of the storm. So it took about 5 months to get my new roof on. Then I came back from an appointment in Victoria County down South Texas, and I spent a week doing storm surge as well as storm damage surveys. So I had an entire week to see the amount of destruction a major hurricane could produce, and talk about like widespread EF3 damage, like miles of EF3 kind of damage. So, you know, tremendous amounts of wind and debris everywhere, and, you know, homes completely gone. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. So I kind of volunteered to really kind of help, but not really thinking that they were going to choose me, I was going through Harvey. And Chris McKinney decided to send John and I down to Key West. And so I kind of already came in with the understanding of what kind of damage a storm like of that magnitude could produce. And because I lived in Corpus and I was also directly impacted by Harvey, I knew how to better empathize with the staff on Key West, because the storm was barreling right towards their homes, their livelihoods, their properties, and their loved ones if they hadn't evacuated. So I had a better understanding of that. And I tell you, when I got down there and I saw the storm moving through Cuba, heading towards Key West, I teared up, because it's such an emotional, you know, you're so emotionally fragile after going through a catastrophic event such as a major hurricane, that it takes a huge toll on you as a person and even as a forecaster. But like you said earlier, Tim, you know, we try to separate ourselves from the job as well as the emotional aspect of the job we have to do, because someone's got a job to do. It's our job to protect those lives and property, even when we know things aren't going as well back home as they would normally. So it was a huge issue that I had to sort of separate myself from the job as also being an emotional human being. So,
I think it's one thing we as meteorologists, we all understand the power of hurricanes and the potential destruction that they can produce. I honestly, I cannot imagine being able to actually see the destruction from Harvey and then being deployed to Key West down there for Irma. And, you know, we all can imagine it, but you had just seen it, and in your mind, you knew, well, what is going to happen if this thing comes across like it looks like it's going to come across, and that would be terrifying to me in a way.
It is, and I still have, I wouldn't say nightmares, but I still think about it quite a bit. NOAA has a good employees assistance program where you can talk to kind of like grief counselors almost in a way. So I took advantage of that. But still, even to this day, I mean, there's nothing that's I'm never gonna forget those both of events. I mean, it was incredible stuff. And yeah, again, it's gonna live with me forever. I mean, I worked in New Jersey. I was there when Sandy came on shore in New Jersey. So I've experienced relatively 3 major events in my career of less than 10 years. So I'd hate to see what's gonna happen the next 20 years of my career, because good God, it's already been pretty crazy. So.
Quick question: Can you sort of speak to what are the specific tactics you use when you're there on shift and you just the weight of what's about to happen? You just feel it's so heavy. How do you? I mean, we talked briefly about separating work and your emotional feelings, but how do you really do that? Do you use such forms as humor? Do you just take a couple deep breaths? Do you have a yoga session? How do you do that exactly?
I think taking lots of deep breaths. If you can, get up and walk as much as possible, just to kind of get away from the keyboard. Humor was huge. So as John alluded to earlier, we met down at the Key West Airport and kind of immediately hit it off. We both can have a relatively dark kind of humor, and it being the situation that we were in, that kind of came out, and we were kind of cutting up. We did our best to keep the staff of Key West as jovial as possible. But again, with the circumstances, it wasn't always easy to do so. Until after the storm had already moved through, then things kind of lightened up, obviously, because people were actually getting out and checking on their homes and properties. And, one of the staff members of Key West, unfortunately, did lose their home, during the event. So, we tried to kind of walk on eggshells around that person. But nonetheless, we tried to keep everyone as lighthearted as possible, because, that's kind of one way you can react to a major event, catastrophe like that, is to laugh it off, almost kind of self-deprecating in a way.
Mm-hmm. That's tough.
Did you guys, what's it like as you and John met? I assume you landed like in Miami, and what's it like as you're trying to drive in and every other person is driving out?
Actually, we flew into Key West.
Okay, so you flew into Key West. So
Key West.
Yeah. You didn't have the pleasure of trying to see everyone getting out and you guys are going in.
No, but basically, John can answer this question better, but basically when we arrived, they were like, what the hell are you doing here?
Yeah, there was a legit, I had a moment when I was in the airport in Atlanta making my connection to Key West, and there's already the mandatory evacuation of Monroe County, and then there was the fact the airport was going to shut down, I think the next day. Was it Greg or Matt? I can't remember. And there were a lot of people at the gate, and I'm standing there like, do you people not know what's happening? Like, I had this moment of like, this isn't right. But yeah, I think we got there, and Mike Samuelson, who's an electronics tech at the Lubbock office, was with us also. Actually, Greg and Mike were on the same flight in. I get in early, and my ASA, Suzanne, put up a heck of a fight trying to get us a rental car. And luckily, Mike was able to secure like the last rental car on the island.
Wow.
So we could get around. We ended up leaving out of Miami, and we had to drive out of the Keys. And I didn't realize I'd never been to the Florida Keys. I never realized how big it is. I mean, even on a good day, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's like 3.5, 4 hours just to get from Key West to Miami, or even back to the mainland almost. So it's a pretty long stretch of island, pretty long chain of islands. But yeah.
Oh, very good. Well, speaking of Matt, let's drop in on him here. Matt is currently the brand spanking new MIC there in San Diego, but before that he had the pleasure of being the MIC in Key West. And actually, if I remember right from the stories that I heard, Matt, you extended your stay in Key West so you could help provide support as Irma came ashore.
Yeah, I did. I stayed about 3.5 extra weeks, and of course, basically the last month was all Hurricane Irma. I had worked, excuse me, at New Orleans and Houston prior, and I've been through a number of big hurricanes. I was on the eye wall of Ike, Hurricane Rita back in 2005, but this by far was the biggest. definitely the biggest event. And I'm going to actually show some pictures while I talk. And I promise I will go quickly through this.
Hello.
And these are all pictures that either I took or they were taken at the office. But want to talk a little bit about the office there. It's a very unique facility for the Weather Service. Right in the middle of Key West, the office, there's been a National Weather Service office in Key West since 1870. But this building was opened in 2005. And Irma was the second major hurricane it went through after Wilma back in 2005. The floor is at 14.5 feet elevation. The core of the building is built to withstand wind gusts to 165. And there's a safe room inside designed for winds of 250. We were not concerned about flooding even when the track shifted west. We still did not anticipate surge flooding, and we didn't get any close to the office. Some pictures of what it was like. Most of these were taken probably the weekend that the storm made landfall, and you see Greg and John there in the upper right. The top left picture is my office. You know, that the typical hurricane diet there. Lots of soft drinks and food. What was it like for us? It was all hands on deck. I worked 26 days in a row and 30 out of 31 days in a row. I finally took a day off in late September. Most of the days were anywhere from 12 to 16 hours. Similar stories for a lot of the other meteorologists there. Our first briefing we sent out on September 1st. The eye wall hit September 10th. So that gives you an idea of, you know, just how long even leading up to the storm. And then afterward, our office wasn't fully up until the 20th. So, you know, we had a kind of a 10-day recovery period. Keep in mind that almost all the meteorologists here, you know, everyone that was working at the office, their families all evacuated. So most of them are staying at Key West, supporting the storm while their families are either in North Florida, Georgia, Alabama, or other areas. And most of the families were gone anywhere from 10 to 14 days. So you can imagine how hard it is. We had to move all of our cars. There's 2 covered parking garages in Key West. And we managed to move everybody that wanted to move to elevate their car. We moved them all over there. The day it hit, this was Sunday, September 10th. The top left there, that's what our office looked like late in the afternoon. We recorded a wind gust to 91 miles an hour at the office, 94 at the airport. We may have gotten a little higher than that before the ASOS went down, but mostly it was tree damage around the office. The other pictures there were all taken on Big Pine Key, which was kind of ground zero. It's about 40 miles northeast of Key West, and there you had a combination of storm surge and wind impacts. We all brought, most all of us stayed at the office for 5 straight days. By the Thursday following the storm, the power was up in most areas. Everybody that was still without power moved to a hotel that day. We all brought food and bottled water to last the days we were sheltered. And, you know, food-wise, we were fine. Folks cleaned out their freezers after the storm, and we were grilling at the office. The water situation was not as fun, as you probably heard from others, but we had low water pressure for several days following the storm. So that was not fun to deal with at all. We never lost power at the office. We stayed on generators, but we did lose the HVAC in the front offices for several days. And, you know, it was a struggle getting contractors down there. But the main part of the building, it stayed up. Social media was really insane. Just the level of exposure that we got on social media during the storm. So Key West is one of the bottom 5 population offices in the Weather Service. And when the storm was over, the office was ranked 3rd of all National Weather Service offices in terms of social media followers. But the tweet on the left there was sent out the Friday before the storm. Remember, the eye wall came through Sunday morning, the 10th. So this was Friday, the 8th. 13.2 million impressions, and it was shared retweeted over 68,000 times. Bill South, he's a lead forecaster down there. He was really he was the manager of the media and social media program. He dictated the article in the middle with the Washington Post that Saturday, and Chelsea Clinton shared the article on Twitter. After that, we were just bombarded with national and international interviews that weekend. A couple of examples, and I want to give a lot of credit to John and Greg for the ideas they brought in from their offices as well. But this is how we messaged the eye wall beginning Saturday evening, lasting into Sunday morning. We did issue 2 extreme wind warnings for the arrival of the eye wall on Sunday morning. After the storm, so an interesting discovery, and again, a lot of credit to Aaron and the team at San Antonio who backed us up for almost an entire week. But what we discovered when the storm was over is we still had 3 phone lines that worked, and they were all our old analog phone lines. One of them was our Roams phone, where we monitor weather radio. Another was our spotter line that we hardly ever used. Both of those were like old 90s phones that we had in operations, and also our conference room phone. Those lines never went down in the hurricane. So for about 3 or 4 days, there was no cell service, no texting. So we really had the only working phone lines on the entire island. So City Hall, a Cat 5 certified building across the street, the mayor was there. On the top left is Jim Scholl, the city manager in Key West, and Roman Gustesi, he's the county administrator from Monroe County. Them and about 100 other folks were sheltered at City Hall throughout the storm. They came over and basically started using our office as a hub of operations. There were 2 major conference calls a day, a lot of side meetings there. We had FEMA, we had FAA, all conducting operations at the office. And big decisions were, how do we get power? How do they get power back up as fast as they can? How do they get the water pressure back up? And when do they reopen the keys? And they actually lifted the evacuation the following Sunday. It was a very tough decision for those leaders to make, but our office became the hub of that decision making there for several days. I thought this was pretty genius. So we had about 10 meteorologists and others at the office, including our ESA there, electronic system administrator. Basically all had damage to their homes. One person, as was mentioned earlier, lost their home completely. Rather than just everyone going home and handling it themselves, the folks at Key West decided to team up and tackle it one property after another. And a lot of credit to the teamwork there at the office. A lot of folks came in. Of course, facility was a big concern. So we had a lot of electronics and facilities folks that came down and delivered generators to help everybody out. A lot of meteorologists supported either remotely or on site. And some offices not only provided backup for the office, but also got us some food and water. And that picture on the bottom right, that's the Swerve trailer from New Orleans. I actually used to work in that in my previous job there. And the New Orleans office sent that trailer down the following Thursday, just stocked with food and water. And it was very emotional when that showed up, for sure. A lot of credit to the office. We had Hurricane Matthew, which was kind of a test run in October 2016. It was a scare for the Keys. The Keys ended up being under warnings, but minimal impacts. But we took a lot of lessons learned from that event, and it helped prepare the office for Irma. So we spent a lot of time with partner building and making technical changes leading up to the storm. And a good example of partner feedback, and I heard a couple of the others on the webinar this morning already talk about this. Nothing but kudos from the partners and the public there in the Keys. And here's an example of a card we got from a family there in the Keys. And it really shows you why we do what we do. I know that Key West has recovered pretty quickly, but there's still a lot of struggles down there. I see the posts on social media every day and talk to the folks down there. You know, a lot of meteorologists at the office are still dealing with property recovery and still rebuilding. There's a housing shortage in the Keys. It was already bad to start with. It's gotten worse. So a lot of the service workers have left. And of course, Keys' #1 economy is tourism. So there's a lot of rebuilding still going on. It was very emotional when I headed out of there and headed to my new position here in San Diego. And finally, we do, down at the Key West office, they fly the warning flags. And all of us that were working the storm signed the flags from Hurricane Irma, and they're now hanging in the lobby. So if you ever make it down to Key West, make sure to stop by the office and take a look.
Wow, great stories. Thanks for sharing all of that.
Absolutely amazing.
Very good. We'll have time at the end, hopefully, to answer some questions, but I'm going to move on to our next panelist. And I did want to remind everyone who's watching that if you do have a question for any of our panelists, use that hashtag NWAWebWed, and we'll try to get those questions answered here as we move along. I want to jump over to, let's see where my notes are. I've lost my place. Okay, here we are with Mr. Gordon Strasburg. He's a female liaison with the National Weather Service, and he got deployed down to, well, first of all, you were going down to Florida for Irma, but then they jumped you even further south and got you ready and sent you down to Puerto Rico for Maria. Is that correct, Gordon?
Yeah, Tim, that's correct. My team, my FEMA incident management assistance team, was deployed to the other end of Florida from Key West. We were in Tallahassee at the state EOC. We got there about 5 days before Irma hit Florida to work with the state on preparations and planning and things like that. And after the storm hit, we were there for about a week or 10 days or so. And then it was Sunday, the 17th of September, we were informed late in the afternoon that we would be leaving the next morning to go to Puerto Rico and start working there with FEMA's Caribbean Area Division personnel to plan and the response to Maria. So we left on Monday morning, and we arrived in San Juan about 36 hours or so before Hurricane Maria made landfall, which was the following Wednesday morning on the 20th. And then we started working there. We ended up working with them at the FEMA's Distribution Center Caribbean, which is in Caguas, Puerto Rico. It's a little bit south of San Juan. And we ended up sheltering in place there from the time we got there Tuesday morning. We ended up sheltering in place there Tuesday night, and then Wednesday night as the storm hit and then pulled away. So we were working there alongside a number of people, a number of FEMA employees who would become survivors themselves and had significant amount of damage to their homes and things like that. Just for some perspective, the storm hit Tuesday night. The building we were in suffered a fair amount of roof damage. We had some numerous water leaks and going on inside the building itself. And then Wednesday morning, as the storm started to pull away, we were struggling with communications due to the reliance on cell phone towers for internet access, or conventional internet access, as the storm did its inflicted its damage. And I'm going to share two pictures here from our in-storm experience. This is where we slept Tuesday night as the storm was approaching. On basically an air mattress on a concrete floor beneath pallets of supplies in the distribution center in the warehouse portion there. So we slept there Tuesday night, and then due to the flooding and some other damage and other concerns, we actually ended up sleeping in their office space, basically lining our air mattress up, almost interconnected like jigsaw puzzles in any open usable space on the floors. And then this was taken Wednesday morning here out the window in the middle, and it's still raining and windy at that time, which is why it's so blurry. That car that's in the foreground there had been parked straight before the storm hit, and we had a number of small vehicles in our parking lot, the smaller compact cars that were actually moved by the wind. We didn't see any that were we didn't have any that had been tossed around or flipped over, but I know there were in other places. I'm going to try and stop sharing my screen here.
It's okay. It's a cool effect.
Yeah, well, and of course my browser is getting sluggish, and there we go.
There
we go.
So, after the storm hit, our biggest immediate challenge was communications. It's basically an island-wide communications blackout. As cell phone towers went offline, their backup generators started running out of fuel, things like that. So for a couple of days, at least the first 2 days post storm, it was pretty difficult in getting any form of communications. We're deployed with some equipment that can help, BGANs or broadband global area networks, which is a small computer size, small laptop sized box basically that can that you can hook up a few computers and landline phones to, and it uses it's satellite-based internet connection, satellite connection to get some communications up and running, and we were able to get two computers hooked up to those and a couple of phone lines. So we had two computers basically for all the things that we needed to do, and communications we had to try. And we were housed there, the 35 of us or so on our team, along with some other FEMA employees that we had brought with us from Florida, from the Florida response. There were the FEMA's Caribbean Area Division folks there that also either sheltered in place or returned home for the storm and then came back at post-storm. There were people from other agencies there with us, DOD, Health and Human Services, Red Cross, just to name a few, who had been there for the Irma response when Irma hit glanced by Puerto Rico, just 10 days earlier, who didn't leave and stayed for the Maria response. So we had about I would estimate 100 people or so. And we had, essentially two phone lines and two computers that were able to get, that were usable for information gathering, situational awareness, communications, and things of that nature. After several days, we relocated that Thursday. We relocated back to San Juan, and after several days, we were able to find somewhat more reliable internet access. It was probably 3 or 4 or 5 days. I think it was like maybe Friday or Saturday post storm, and the storm hit on Wednesday. We were able to find some internet access, with some cell phone towers, that were having their, as debris was being cleared, the cell phone companies were able to get out and start refueling the towers and the generators. We were able to find some access that way. It wasn't steady or reliable because it was all dependent on if the tower got its fuel delivery on time that morning, if the generator had not, hopefully the generator had not been stolen, which was, unfortunately the case. People were taking, any generators they could get their hands on. But even still, first, communications were a challenge, and I was relying on, first thing in the morning, 6 a.m., getting to work, and I don't have internet, we don't have internet service up yet, and it's not going to be up for a couple hours, but I still have to provide a whole bunch of weather briefings first thing in the morning, between 7 and 8 a.m. So we, for whatever reason, I had just enough cell phone service on one of my phones, not to get actual data, but to be able to get a text message out. So I was text messaging, a coworker and friend, hey, really quick, who was also deployed, mind you, at that point, hey, really quick, can you tell me if anything's changed with the forecast for Puerto Rico from the night before, from what I had last seen? So it was really, everybody was scrambling to get information and situational awareness, and things like that. And one thing that really helped, and then I'll cut myself off here, there really was, a Herculean effort within the Weather Service to continue providing support and to the response efforts. When we eventually got set up at the Puerto Rico Convention Center there in San Juan with our initial operating facility, the PREMA, the Puerto Rico Emergency Management Agency, was set up on the second floor, and the WFO San Juan office was sending meteorologists there every day to provide support directly to them. And then the federal response was taking place up on the third floor of the convention center, and I was doing my briefings up there. The WFO was down, and Miami, WFO Miami was providing full service backup for them, including issuing the forecast, warnings, etc. They still had internet access though at this, or at least some communication capability at the San Juan office. So they were sending out, sending out specialized, weather summaries every morning at the end of their midnight shift, to help the response efforts. The Miami office providing the full service backup, issuing flash flood warnings, forecast updates, constant chatter and coordination. And then, a lot of people don't realize we also had the international desk at the Weather Prediction Center up in College Park actually spun up, kind of an unprecedented level of support for them. And they started producing specialized QPF graphics and hosting them on a web page that for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands that were updated every night at the end of their midnight shift. And they had a distribution list where they would send it out. They send us out the actual images in case we couldn't get on the web. We had limited bandwidth or whatever, and their international forecast discussion. And they were in constant coordination with those of us who were providing the weather support on the ground as well. And that was spun up a couple of days after the storm, and it's still ongoing, actually. And those folks there were also, were working the same, 7 days a week, 12 to 16 hours a day, plus that we were down there on the ground. And so it was just really a far-reaching effort to provide the weather support that was needed for the response.
I don't know if you said it, but how long were you on the ground in Puerto Rico?
So I was there. I was on the ground for 30 days. So September, it was 32 days, I suppose. So it was September 18th to October 20th.
Wow. Very impressive.
And every day was 12 to 16-hour days. Is that correct?
Yep. Every day was 12 to 16-hour days. And between that and the 2 weeks that we had spent in Florida over that course of the 6 week period, it was 12 to 16-hour days every day. I was able to take one sort of day off in there, in those 6 weeks, but I was still providing the necessary weather information. I just wasn't there and actively engaged. I just planned it on a quiet weather day, so it was not, hopefully too much of an impact.
Very good. Well, Gordon, I appreciate you sharing your stories there and your pictures.
Yeah, thank you.
That's very impressive. And right now, since we've already gone over an hour, I want to get real quickly to Jason. Last but not least of our panelists here is Jason there in Houston. And Jason, a lot from the broadcast media, and I heard a lot from the Weather Service side of things. What's it like from the private meteorology kind of side of the house, doing support as, again, you can see it coming? What kind of support did you guys provide? But then also talk about, you're there in Houston. So at what point you realize, yikes, this is going to directly impact me, and how did that affect you in your operations there?
Yeah, so our kind of Universal Weather and Aviation, we have 700 employees. We support we do aviation, weather, and flight plans and trip support. So in this building in Houston, which is by NASA Space Center, we have 700 people, 33 meteorologists. The two roles I have is managing the meteorology department, but also business continuity, because we have to be running 24/7. Our clients are all over the world. We do global forecasting, so we can never be out of business. So I have to set up a plan to keep us running, and part of it is one of our business recovery sites is in Austin, Texas. Had to decide, do we move to Austin? Do we stay here? And since Austin was more or less under the gun from Harvey, we decided just to ride it out here. And we sent all the non-operational employees home Friday afternoon. The operational employees, which is about 255 of us, had to, make things work. And my plan was, I came in Saturday morning, set up my cot, my go bag, and everything in my office, and I was going to come back Sunday morning and run things for the duration. Went home that night. I live in League City, which is just south of Houston. My neighborhood had never flooded. Figured no worries. Well, that night I went to bed, and over the night we had 15 inches of rain, and so I was flooded into my neighborhood. Knee deep water. In fact, I can show you real quick a few pictures. Share this. Can y'all see that yet?
Yes.
Okay, so that's my neighborhood. That's my wife. Actually, the day the hurricane was our anniversary. So that's us. That's wading through the water. We had ended up being rescued by a boat, and came back later that night to get some more clothes, because what we were wearing is all we had. And we also have 4 dogs, so we had to be rescued with dogs and all that kind of fun stuff. And that morning, I literally had my laptop in my house and trying to send out weather forecasts and keep everybody updated for my office until we lost power. And then, again, they had to be rescued by a boat. So that part was a huge challenge.
So, I mean, your house is flooding. You're there at your house, and you're still providing support. How does that work mentally?
It was challenging. And then when I lost power, because I'm kind of the go-to person for everything in my company, so people were trying to get a hold of me by my cell phone and everything else. And of course they couldn't, and they were freaking out. And the funny thing was, when I stepped out on the front porch in knee-deep water to see if I could find a rescue boat, all of a sudden my phone came on, and I had hundreds of text messages and missed phone calls and everything else. So yeah, that was a challenge. And even to this day, we're still living in a camper in my driveway. My house is still being worked on, and it's ironic that I said earlier that we got down to 20 degrees last night. 20 degrees in a camper is not fun. No.
Those are some of the supplies you probably don't think about needing in the long term. Is down comforters or something. If your house is destroyed in a hurricane and you have to live in a camper, holy cow, this could go on through the winter. And I mean, Texas, Houston, you don't think about cold weather like that, but mentally that must be a huge challenge.
This is my winter jacket that I'm wearing right now, because this happened in August and September, and we had to save some clothes. But you said we don't think about January being 20 degrees in Houston, Texas. So.
Right.
Wow.
And as far as my office goes, it was kind of neat. This is the first time we use a lot of the social media, Facebook and WhatsApp, to keep our employees, and mostly the weather team. Again, we have to run 24/7, usually 6 forecasters per shift, and still support international weather. And everybody else had the same thing, had their own personal issues to worry about. So it was a big challenge, but they all stepped up. It was incredible.
That's one thing that, and I know it's not uncommon in the meteorological community, but so many times that we have to separate our emotions from what's going on in our hometowns and just continue to provide that support. It doesn't mean that we don't feel. It doesn't mean that we don't, worry and have our own emotional issues. But so many times, meteorologists have to kind of set that aside and continue to serve the public that we all serve in various ways, whether it's your clients, whether it's the people on the other end of your TV broadcast, or whether you're the government meteorologist providing support. It's just the weather community continues to just, I don't want to say amaze me because I've done it myself, but it's just been very impressive the way that in these three hurricane cases, how many people had to step up, set aside personal issues, personal worries and things, and continue to provide that support to the public. And I think you're kind of the epitome of it. There you are, your house is flooded, and you're continuing to provide support to your clients and to your employees from a flooded house. That just stuns me. So I salute everybody on the panels, the support and just gumption kind of to work through things. I know it was emotionally difficult, and I know that you're still, like Greg said, it's he's not waking up with nightmares, but it still kind of haunts you, or it's an experience that you'll always keep in your mind. Mm-hmm. We did get one question in on Twitter, and I know we've gone well past an hour, so we'll kind of keep this short. But the question was, and anybody feel free to answer this, but since we'd kind of gone through this major hurricane drought, how much of the inertia of or the hurricane amnesia, or this, the cry wolf kind of things, how much of that did you kind of have to overcome as the hurricane was, as your particular hurricane that you had to deal with was coming in your direction? And anybody just hop in and answer.
I can tell you from a business perspective, it's that you said the exact word. In fact, I used it in a briefing to my executive committee that don't get hurricane amnesia, because I'm always trying to get a bigger budget to do different things because of this. And 2 weeks after the hurricane, oh yeah, he's right, let's do this, and now we're into January and everybody's like moving on to the next thing. So it doesn't take very long to get that amnesia to set in from a business perspective.
I have one thing to say on that. It's kind of different here. We got hit with 30 miles away, this big Category 4 hurricane, and Corpus Christi came out kind of unscathed. So I think there's a false sense of security here now after Harvey for Corpus Christi, and I think that's going to be a challenge going forward if we get another storm here, because everyone thinks, I've seen shirts, I survived a Category 4 hurricane, and it's like, kind of didn't. It was a tropical storm as far as the effects were in Corpus Christi, so that's going to be a challenge going forward here.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Alan. Is communication this upcoming year is going to be really tough because people think you survived the Category 4, and like Alan said, you really didn't. So how do you message that when it's coming again towards you? Like, oh, we can hang out in our house again like we did last time. Like, you probably don't want to do that. So,
right.
Wow.
Well, but I think it's good that you're cognizant of that and aware of that, and you can actually kind of tailor your messaging to actually say, hey, 30 miles up the coast, that's where the damage was, that's where the real destruction was. Here in town, not so bad. Just kind of put that in perspective, kind of thing. So I think as you move forward, you're going to be able to adjust your messaging and address that directly.
I know currently our WCM John Metz on here is kind of doing like a whirlwind tour. Every single municipality in South Texas wants to have him come out and talk about Harvey. So showing the videos, showing pictures of Rockport, Port Aransas, Victoria, where I was, Port Lavaca, showing where all the major damage was, and people I think might have a better understanding in terms of actually what happened, especially those who had never been there before, or at least after the Harvey, that is. Maybe kind of gives them a little bit more of an idea of what could happen. But yeah, that false sense of security is going to be tough to, I think, to deal with from here on out.
Wow. And I know that there are people in Puerto Rico still without electricity. They're still trying to recover. So
it's terrible.
Yeah, I think that these hurricanes will live in people's memories, certain people's memories, for a long time, and then like let's see, like Jason said, some people have already moved on. It's impressive. So it's always a challenge messaging for hurricanes, and trying to get the right message, the right balance out, get people to take them seriously without scaring them, but you still want them to take some kind of action.
Mm-hmm. I had a quick question for the panel here. For those who live in a hurricane area, or if you work in an office that's right along the coast, or in the sense in the future for those who volunteered their time, has that changed your perspective on either living near the coast or working, or even your willingness to volunteer to work to be deployed in these major hurricanes? Has this experience changed your perspective on all that? Are you wanting to move? Are you not going to be as willing to volunteer next time? That sort of thing.
I guess personally, I knew moving down here what could happen. I mean, I've always worked in a coastal office. Again, Mount Holly, New Jersey has got a lot of coast to deal with, and then down here in South Texas, I mean, I moved from kind of Philadelphia area down here to South Texas, so we kind of went from like mostly nor'easters down to tropical haven. And when Harvey was approaching, I really feared for having moved my family down here so far away, and all our family's back on the East Coast, and having no one other than some close friends to really kind of help rely on to take care of my family, wife, and kids. When I was deployed for both Harvey and Irma, it was tough because, again, even during Irma, we still had issues here in South Texas to deal with at our own house. But I definitely would volunteer again. Again, it just kind of speaks to the true volume of what we as meteorologists, kind of almost like incident meteorologists do on the front lines every day. It's kind of thrilling, which is maybe like a sick way to put it, but it kind of gets you hyped up, and it really wants you to do the best you can. And again, helping your fellow coworker, helping your fellow man any way you possibly can, which is again working with them side by side on the front lines.
I think when you're actually in it too, you're so immersed in what you're trying to do, get messages out, that you don't really think about yourself when it's all happening during the actual time. But I know that there was some moments for me leading up to it where it's a feeling of helplessness almost, because the potential that's out there, and there's almost, there's not a whole, you're not going to sit there and move your life away to a city that, you just can't do that. You're there, you're in it. And while you're working, your mind kind of switches gears. But then when you remove yourself from work, that's when I think a lot of the reality of what just happened hits you. And I think that's the same for probably a lot of the people and the panelists on here.
Yeah, just on my side of it, I've done this for 30 years now, and I would think that all of us were meteorologists not because we wanted to be on TV and say, "Hey, tomorrow's going to be a bad hair day." We like the science of meteorology, and we're helping people. And the civilian world doesn't realize how stressful this job is, and how we put everything together. And again, it's not. They think of the TV guys, and nothing against TV people, but that's what they see. They don't see the behind the scenes stuff that we do, the working hard, and we really do worry about people's lives, and we try our best. It's whether it's not exact science, we miss it sometimes, no doubt about it. But that's just the fun of it, just feeling like you're helping somebody. I think you use a digital first responder kind of thing. That's a really cool term. I stole that from you, by the way. But yeah, I agree. It's part of the job, and the reason we all went to school to do this.
Yeah,
Sure.
I was just going to say, that's why a lot of us became meteorologists and forecasters, is to help people. And so that's really great to hear that you guys want to continue to help people. And me personally, I live in Alaska now. I don't want to live anywhere near hurricanes, and I applaud each and every one of you who live there and want to help out with the hurricanes. You guys have guts. I appreciate that.
But Becca, you have your own challenges there.
We have earthquakes and tsunamis, I guess, to have to worry about here in Anchorage, but not quite hurricanes.
But that's wherever you are in the United States, almost every place has some kind of weather challenge, and it's our job, whether again you're in broadcast, private, or governmental, is to provide that support to our partners, the public, or whoever, and it behooves us to get to know our areas, know our area of responsibilities, know the kind of threats that we do face. I'm in El Paso. I'm not real concerned about hurricanes, but I am concerned about fire weather. I am concerned about flooding and things like that. So again, like you said, it's a science, but it's also a social service. And it was interesting, especially when Aaron was talking about being able to provide support and provide information that was going out, and just provide relief to people so that they would know that the information is still flowing. Just that has nothing to do with any equations of as far as meteorology goes. It's just us helping the people, being as a conduit of information. So like Becca said, I applaud you all for your dedication and your service. I want to kind of wrap things up because we're coming up on an hour and a half, and I know that's a little longer than we had told you all we were going to go. But I did want to thank everybody on the call. Aaron Treadway there in San Antonio, Alan Holt in Corpus, Gordon there up in near DC with FEMA liaison with the NWS, Jason there in Houston, Matt Moreland now in San Diego, but was down there for Irma down in the Keys, Jonathan, forecaster there in Norman, Greg Heavener, forecaster in Corpus, and of course my co-host today, Becca, up in Alaska. I want to thank everybody who was on the call today. A lot of great stories. I mean, I'm pretty sure we could sit here for another hour and a half, 2 hours, and talk about the stories and the support and just the dedication that you guys all provided during these events. So I appreciate you taking your time. I appreciate everybody who joined us. I saw most people stayed for the whole time. So I appreciate you taking the time to stick with us and listening to these stories. And I hope you've been able to take something from it. And of course, we do webinars once a month. Usually it's the first Wednesday of the month. Sometimes we adjust that depending on people's schedules. And so I don't think we quite have nailed down the February webinar. Is that right, Becca?
That's correct. We haven't quite nailed it down yet, but we're still looking at that first Wednesday of February. I think it's the 7th. So keep your eyes peeled for emails, for social media, and we'll let you know when the next one will occur and what it will be about.
Very good.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you again to everybody on the panel. Everyone have a great day. I think for most of the people in the country, I can say stay warm, but enjoy the weather. And again, I really appreciate everyone joining us today, and have a great day.